Welcome to our program in a nutshell. I'm Bob Savakinus. Today we have legendary local television personality Mike Stevens. Mike grew up in Swarsville, Pennsylvania in Luzerne County. He attended Swarsville High School, graduated from Swarsville High School, also attended King's College. He worked in radio for approximately 10 years at local radio stations WNAK, WILK, and of course the legendary WARM, the mighty 590. He began in television in 1975, working at WNEP Channel 16. He founded the program called On the Pennsylvania Road in 1978, continued the program till 1979, and moved out of the area. He began working in television in North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Florida, and returning back to WNEP, northeastern Pennsylvania in 1983. At that point, he picked up the legendary TV series segment called On the Pennsylvania Road. And a quote from Mike is, "Everyone has a story, and it's my job to find it and put it on TV." Welcome, Mike Stevens, to our program.
Thank you, Robert. Good to be here. Good to be here. Nice to be with you for a while.
Thank you. It's my honor for having been on your program several times on the Pennsylvania Road for some of the historical events that I was involved with and documentaries and things like that, but to be on the other side of the camera this time, actually speaking with you. Mike, as I mentioned in your intro, On the Pennsylvania Road, legendary in northeastern Pennsylvania. How did that idea, that segment, come to you, and how did it evolve?
Well, to tell you the truth, it was one of these things that was assigned to me. In 1977, 78, something like that, the manager came over to me, general manager, Eldon Hale at the time, and he said, we want to start this thing called On the Pennsylvania Road. And I said, and he said, we want you to do it. And I said, okay, that's fine, but what do you do? And he said, well, we're not sure what you do, but we want you to do it 3 times a week. So here I am, stuck. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I literally went door to door looking for stories. And I would drive out into the country and, just talk to people. And finally, eventually, I found the first story. And we did it. And after that, it was, just away you go. They started to come in easier and easier, and it got funnier and funnier.
So growing up in Luzerne County, Swarsville and everything, did you think that your career would become so legendary? And I use that term because it is. I mean, your voice is just so soothing with people. You're such a great storyteller. And obviously for all these years, for decades, you've been doing this. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts growing up? And were you always looking at broadcast, journalism, things like that? Not
till I got, maybe 7th grade, something like that. I started to think that would be neat to be on radio. That was the big thing at radio at that point. That was the most popular means of communication. Television was in its infancy. But I liked radio. I liked to be able to talk on radio. And that's how it started. Evolved over a period of years. I'll tell you, the one thing that got me interested in writing happened in about 10th grade. And I tell this story frequently because teachers sometimes don't feel appreciated, see. But the teacher we had at that point in 10th grade was a substitute, not a substitute, a student teacher. She had just come in and was working in English. That's what we had. And she assigned us to write poetry. And I wrote over a period of a week or whatever it was, I sat down and I wrote poetry, a couple of pieces. And I don't even know where they are today. They're probably so mediocre they were burned somewhere.
That might be a story for the Pennsylvania Road, though, your poetry. But
anyway. So I did this, and she actually liked them. And I thought, boy, isn't that great? Somebody actually likes my writing. And from there, now one thing led to another and another and another. But I tell the story again because this was a teacher who had an impact on me that covered my entire life, my entire working career. So when the news director at the TV station came to me and said, "Do you want to do this?" and I'll go out and tell stories, it just fit right in, and there I was out on the road. So
let's go back to radio a little bit. So in your introduction, I read off a couple of our local radio stations, and of course they've been around for many, many years. And how did that play about as far as the radio industry goes and the couple stations you work with?
You mean how I spent my time there? Or?
Right, like your career, what was it in radio? Because I think most people know you for WNEP Channel 16 as opposed to radio. So fill us in and our viewers in a little bit about your radio background.
Yeah, I started at WNAK, and I was really just, I was in the cleanup. Literally, figuratively, not figuratively, literally cleaning up. And they let me, in return, get a half hour of board time behind the control board. Okay. And at that point there was no such thing as modern electronics were strange things. But you learn to work the board. You learn to cue records. All these things that you normally did, you had to learn them somewhere. So I learned them in my half hour of every day. And I finally got to working it, and I picked up on news. I liked news because you got to write a lot of stuff. And eventually I left NAK, went up to Wilk Radio, and worked news there with Dave DeCosmo, and worked the morning shift. So I was on from 6 to 1 or something like that, or 2. And I would read a lot of news, but I got to write the news too. And when I finally got to Warm, I think I did 13 newscasts a day, I believe. And I wrote every one of them, if it was possible. If it was too busy, of course, you had no choice. But I would try to write every newscast because it was great practice to me. And that was it, that's how I evolved into news. And so when I went over to 16, I started off doing news, working Luzerne County, and doing a Luzerne County beat until the road thing came along, and I moved down to that,
So back in 1978, 79, somewhere around there, when you were with WNEP Channel 16 at that point, you were just a reporter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So the segment was just beginning to develop at that point then on the Pennsylvania Road.
Yeah, the news director assigned it the way I was talking about it before. He said, "We want you to go and do this," and I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Well, we don't know, but we want you to do it 3 times a week." And there I went. That was it, and it started from there and went going on. The first guy that I did with a story, or as a story, was a farmer who could forecast the weather. Okay. And
that's important.
Yeah, it is. If you're a farmer, you need to have this information. But he did it like he'd say, well, we'd sit on the front porch and he'd say, well, he said, "Did you hear?" He said, "That cricket under the porch just chirped 14 times." And I said, "No, I didn't hear that." I said, "There's 700 crickets underneath that porch." He said, No. He said, "I'm listening to one in particular." And he said, "That one just chirped 14 times. He said, "You know what that's going to mean, don't you?" I said, "No, what is that going to mean?" He said, "It's going to be fair weather tomorrow morning." How do I know? He said, it's like the birds across the street. See those birds up on the wire up there? I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know what that means, don't you?" I said, "No." Said it's going to be bad weather tomorrow night. So from there, it pretty much went on. That was it. He set the standard,
So this farmer maybe is a weather forecaster at one of the stations, or maybe developed becoming a weather forecaster. Anyway, we joke about that. So what made that transition that you went from radio to television? Why did that happen? Was that part of your professionalism that you wanted to continue, or what was the reason?
To be very honest with you, Eldon called me. Eldon Hale was, I misspoke before, he was the news director. And Eldon called me up over at Warm And he said, so we have an opening for a reporter. Would you be interested in coming over? And I, in a sense, said, well, I guess so. I'm not doing anything else. I have never had a plan per se. I never set out and said, this is what I'm going to do 5 years from now. This is where I'm going to be. I never had a plan like that. I didn't know what I was going to do in 5 years. I didn't know what I was going to do tomorrow. Oh. And so Eldon called me up and said, come on over, and said, if you're interested, we'll give you an audition. So I did an audition, read some news, and he said, okay, well, you want a job? I said, I guess, and I went to work over at WNEP. So that's how it happened. I never planned anything. I really never did. And I've just been awfully lucky, really. That's the only way I can describe it.
So just following your career path, and so then you left WNEP and you went out of state to a couple of areas working in television. Then how were those years?
Oh,
because I don't think most of our viewers or our people would know that you left our area for X amount of years to work outside.
Yeah.
It feels like you've been here with us for decades, which you have been. But again, being that personality that is so important to our culture and our broadcast history in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Well, I ended up I started off by going to Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina in '79. I worked at 3 Mile Island because everybody did it that couple of days. And, excuse me, and right after that, 3 weeks later, I left to go to North Carolina. Lovely state, got into, we never worked 20 miles, we went 20 miles before we started to think about a story. Went 20 miles outside of Raleigh, Durham. And we would go into the hills, and develop the stories there. So, did some there. After about a year, moved on to Madison, Wisconsin. Lovely place, lovely city, and worked there for, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. And I got a call from Eldon again, who by that point was the news director down at WFTV in Florida. And this is exactly the way it went. It was February in Madison, Wisconsin. And as I looked out the back window, when I'm talking to him on the phone, the snow is blowing horizontally across the back window, like this. And he said, so I said, well, what are you doing with yourself? He said, we just got out of the pool, and he said, I'm putting some hamburgers on the grill now. He said, we're going to sit outside, have dinner tonight, maybe have some friends over or something. He said, how'd you like to come to work in Florida? I looked out the window and I heard what he said, and I thought, that's not a bad idea.
Didn't take you long to make that decision, did it?
So I went down there, and that's where I stayed, and
how did we get you back to northeastern Pennsylvania, Channel 16, after those adventures?
Let's just say that management changed at Florida, and they decided they were going in different ways. They didn't particularly care for features that much. And so that was the end of it. Eldon had, by that time, moved up back to WNEP, and so I called him up, and he said, well, as it just so happens, the guy who was doing on the Pennsylvania Road moved on to something else. So if you want to come back, you can do it, It's okay. So my family was still here, my parents, my father, and my wife's parents were here, and a lot of family. So it was a good move for us to come back. And plus I got to do the road pieces again, I think it was important too, because it put me back in my own realm, I guess is the right word. I knew people here. I knew how people think. I knew what they considered valuable. I knew how to make pierogi, you know. And I found out how to make stove rags, say. So those kinds of things I kind of knew coming in. And so I could relate, I think, to people better than I could down in North Carolina or Florida. So that was good. It made my life a lot easier. My wife, of course, thinks it's been too easy all my life, but hey.
Nothing wrong having a career that you love.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of thing. It's never like going to work in the morning. You know, you just, hey, where are you going today? My wife would ask, and I'd say, well, I think I gotta go fishing today with somebody. And she'd say, you're going fishing. And I'd say, yeah. And so I'd get home at the end of the night and she'd say, well, how was today's rough day? And I'd say, well, it was doing pretty well, but the diner that I like, the apple pie wasn't cool enough to cut yet. So I have to go back tomorrow.
Just, again, let's look at a little bit of a recap of On the Pennsylvania Road. How many years have you done it for?
Oh boy, 83, and let's see, I think it was 2 years now, maybe a little over that I stopped doing them. I do some other things, but I don't do the road pieces anymore. John Meyer does them. So I don't know how many years that is, but it's a,
Looks like a little less than 40
it's
years,
a long
maybe.
time. Yeah.
So
Well,
how
we
many
should
miles did you log? How many stories did you do if you had to just take a rough guess or something?
take a rough guess. Yeah, we used to do 3 stories a week. That was mandatory. There were times when I would do road trips around Pennsylvania. We'd run maybe 13, 15 stories that week over a period of time, or a period of week. Just telling people where to go, what to visit, what they can see in Pennsylvania. But I'd say, we did probably 150 stories a year, roughly.
Multiplied by
Yeah,
a little less than 40 years.
It's a couple thousand stories,
So where do the ideas come from for all these stories? I mean, did people contact you with ideas? Did you seek them out? I mean, or combination, or?
Yeah, it is a combination, Bob. It's like, you get a call from somebody who says, my uncle, he builds model trains out of wood. And I'd say, well, gee, that sounds kind of interesting. Where will I get in touch with him? And they'd give me a phone number and a name, and I'd call, and we'd go down and do the story, There were times when I really got stuck, and we would go out and make one up.
Okay.
Literally. I remember going with a photographer to Tunkhannock area somewhere. I don't even remember where the place was now, but it was up a dirt road. So, and I'm stuck. I got nothing that day. But it doesn't matter. The newscast wants that story at the end. So drive up there, and we're on this dirt road going down somewhere, and we get to a T intersection. And I said to the photographer, I looked around, I said, well, this'll do. He said, for what? And I said, well, for a story. He said, where? There's no story here. I said, well, I don't know. There's horses over there out in the field, and, it's kind of a cloudy, rainy type day, and, let's do a story on what it's like out here today. People won't see this today. They won't. Nobody will be here, so let's see what we can come up with. And sure enough, we did a story on it, And then I would do the essay pieces that I liked with, you saw the one for the Flag Day piece that I did the other day. That's an old story, but they reused them. But we would do that, and, people don't have the time to look at those things. We're all so busy, and people, especially with families, they've got kids to deal with, they've got places to go, they got to take the kids here, take the kids there, They're always busy. Everybody's busy, and they don't have a chance to sit and pay attention to a creek in the woods on an afternoon in spring, see? And that was one of our goals, make it so they could be there if they watched this story. They would get 2 minutes of a creek in springtime, which may not sound like much, but when you're running all day, you stop for 2 minutes and you pay attention to a creek. It's quite an event, I think. So that was the goal. That was the idea,
So you're even doing it now. You're telling us a story about a story, but you're turning it into your wonderful ability to tell a story with your soothing, calming voice and your nice, slow, steady pace of telling us it.
Well.
And again, that's why I think for 4 decades or so, you've been a fixture in northeastern Pennsylvania. I want to go back to this quote again that came in your bio, in which it tells us that you say that everyone has a story, and it's my job to find it and put it on TV.
Right, exactly.
And for all these years, you've lived by that and have broadcast that throughout our area to tell us those stories.
Yep.
I know through the years, again, I mentioned earlier that I've been on a couple of your episodes and everything, and mainly because of my projects with history and things like that. So what are some of your interests? I mean, obviously local history seems to be very, very prevalent with you.
Yep.
What is Mike Stevens the person?
Well, my interests are, I guess, photography and still writing. I like to take still pictures, and I try to match the pictures with some sort of a story, mostly fiction, that I make up as I go along. But I try blogs, I try different things, different sequences to write, and I try to get the best pictures I can. I'm not a professional by any stretch. Don't worry about that being taken over out there, folks. You take pictures for a living. I don't. I just do it for the fun of it and hope that something comes out. But I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of getting a picture framed just right and all that other stuff, and it's engrossing for me. And then the writing becomes, second nature. I look at something and think about it and then write about it. So,
you've spent all these years telling us our stories of northeastern PA and its history and things like that. What are some of the unique characteristics that you have found on the Pennsylvania Road of our communities?
Hardworking, I think. I think people go to work here, and I don't know if that's still the case today in this era, because we're in a new generation, of course. But growing up, it was kind of thing where you went to work. My father worked in a plating factory. They put the silver finish or chrome finish on bolts and nuts and things. And that's what he did for a living. And it was hot in the summertime, and he walked to work every day, 2 miles, 3 miles, something like that, to the place that he worked. And home at night, 3 to 11 shift he worked, and he'd walk home at night. And it was that kind of that I grew up with. And all my neighbors around my house when I was growing up, they did the same thing. They went to work at all hours of the day and night, and they would work 8 hours a day, and they'd come home. And that's where I learned the value of hard work. My wife tells me that I don't do hard work, and it's true, I don't. But I look around and I see people who do hard work, and I respect that. I respect people who can take a piece of wood and turn it into a small steam engine replica, or a mining car replica. People who can take models like this and paint them so that they look real. If you shoot them on a railroad track at a model, it looks real, unless somebody tells you, well, it's only a toy. But look at it, to me, that's amazing. And I guess I learned in respect to respect people who work hard and earn a living and try their best to raise their families, try their best to make ends meet. I respect that. And I'm happy to be part of it, even in a small, tiny way, telling their stories, you know.
I'm looking at your career, and it seems as if you've always been on the cutting edge, as one would say, for a term. You were in radio when that was the major form of broadcasting or getting the news out there, getting the word out there. You moved on to television for all those decades, as we discussed. And from what I understand now, you're semi-retired from WNEP, still doing little things here and there, but you do podcasts and a couple of other things. Do you want to tell us what is the future with Mike Stevens, and what's the current and what's the future with Mike Stevens for what's out there?
Well,
and sharing it with us.
Yeah, the current, I'm not that kind of a forward looker, Bob, you know, I mean,
It seems that way just based on what we've observed through the years, but
yeah,
please.
But so I kind of stumble into things, you know.
Okay.
And I don't know, I think it's the internet obviously is the way things are going. We're looking at an era when that's where you got to play to, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do, is to build an audience on Twitter and the other situations, you know, and I play around with putting stuff on the web, blogs and things like that, because I think that's where the audience is a lot of times. It's certainly proven by the last couple of weeks. You know, you look on there and you can't get space in some places. So, you know, as far as my forward looking, I can't take credit for that. But
right place at the right time?
You know, that's what it comes down to. I mean, to make a long story longer, I've been in the right place at the right time, and that was it. It just sort of happened.
So did you think, as that kid growing up in Swarsville, that all these years later that your voice would become so recognizable, your writing skills to tell a story? And I mean, how do you feel about that? How does your family feel about what you've created and what you've accomplished in telling our stories in northeastern Pennsylvania?
They they don't even think about it, really. You know, they give me grief once in a while when I visit for a bit, but you know, essentially people just accept me. I mean, that's what I do for a living. You know, it's not. I mean, I don't know how to answer the question.
Okay.
But my family is the kind of thing where they say, well, what trouble did you get into this week? And I'd say, well, I didn't get into too much trouble. I think I'm going to go fishing. And they'd say, oh, that's big, you know. So it carries down. People make fun of me.
Well, I can remember myself being on, again, I'm saying it again, a couple shows that I was involved with you for some of the things I did. And I remember us once, I think we were on the floor playing with toy trains. I know we've done some trolley things on Rocky Glen Park and everything. So I think I might have to agree with some of your family that you were out there playing and having fun at the same time, even though it is work. And I wish that so many other people would enjoy something similar to that, in which work and play are kind of one and the same.
Yep. It never changed me because I enjoyed it. When I was playing with trains with you, I enjoyed it. I had a good time.
Tonka trucks, that's what we were doing too. We were playing with Tonka trucks too.
Yeah, too. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, what's not to enjoy? See? And, you know, I'd go out, I used to do some stuff for Pennsylvania Outdoor Life. And I would be on their show. And so we'd go fishing. I mean, really. Or go out on the river. Go whatever, fishing or just bird watching or whatever. And those were the kinds of things I did. You know, well, what's not to like about them? I mean, I found them fascinating. To have somebody actually take a piece of wood and split it all up and cut it all up and come out with a replica of a mine car painted with lettering on it. That was amazing to me, just amazing. And then I had to listen to the man tell the stories about coal mining in a different era, an era that I was no longer part of. It was no longer available to us. He pointed out from his front porch there was a mine up on top of the hill from him, maybe a mile away. And he said that when that mine was working, he would go out on the front porch in the morning before daybreak and watch the coal miners walk to work. He said it was like a serpentine bundle of lights going up the hill to get to the coal mine. These men went to work in the dark, worked in the dark all the time. They were working, and then came home in the dark. They never saw daylight until the weekend, and only then if they were lucky.
And it's going back to your hard work ethic that you
Yeah.
were just describing a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and that's what. But then this guy makes replicas of mine cars, for crying out loud, you know. But tells the stories. What great stories they were.
Was there ever that elusive story that you never got to do, or that you still hope to do, or something?
No, not really. If I could dream it, I could do it. You know, that's the way we approached it. And believe me, we dreamed up some.
It sounds like, but it was fun.
Yeah.
But it was also newsworthy, and
Yeah.
the public
well,
enjoyed it.
Yeah, and they would, you know, they quit after a while. They decided, management decided at my place that, well, okay, we'll approve the script, bring it over. And so I would show them a script, which I liked, by the way. I wanted somebody to read it because you make mistakes, you know, when you're going through. But after a while, they kind of gave up on trying to fix things that I did, you know, or change things or work this way or some such, because there was no point in doing it. I would just turn around and do the same thing the next week, you know, and they'd say, okay, well, it's not gotten us into trouble, so we're okay, you know.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for being our guest today on our program and sharing all these years of your legendary broadcast personality and history in our area, for all that you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being our guest. I'm Bob Savakinus. In a nutshell, thank you to Mike Stevens, and tune in again.